Aesop's Fables. We have some really interesting stories today. The Thief and His Mother. A schoolboy stole a hornbook from one of his fellows and brought it home to his mother. Instead of chastising him, she said, "That was very clever of you, my son." As the boy grew older, he began to steal things of greater value until at length, being caught in the very act, he was arrested, tried, found guilty, and sentenced to be hanged. The day of his execution arrived, and he was taken from his cell and led to the gallows. In the crowd that followed the cart, the thief saw his mother weeping and beating her breast. He begged the officers to be allowed to speak one word in his sorrowing mother's ear. When she came near and inclined her head to her to hear his last word, he suddenly bared his teeth and bit her savagely in the lobe of the ear. Ow! All the bystanders were horrified and pushed forward with threatening gestures toward the thief. They could not understand such inhuman conduct of a son toward his mother. Then he cried out, "You think me a brute, and I am, but I have this woman to thank for the fact that I shall soon be swinging on the gallows. She is my mother, but when I was small and did mischief, instead of punishing me, she encouraged me to my ruin. Behold, an unnatural son, because when I was small, I had an unnatural mother." Yikes! Spare the rod and spoil the child. Wow, that was a pretty stiff story. Well, but there's some truth to it. Here's the next one: The Eagle and the Beetle. A hare, remember that's a rabbit, pursued by an eagle, sought refuge in the nest of a beetle whom he entreated to save him. The beetle interceded with the eagle and begged him not to break the law of sanctuary. But the eagle in his wrath gave the beetle a flop with his wing and straightway seized upon the hare and devoured him. When the eagle flew away, the beetle flew after him in order to learn where his nest was hidden. Then one day, when the eagle was away, the beetle returned and rolled the eagle's eggs out of the nest one by one and broke them. Grieved and enraged that anyone should attempt so audacious a thing, the eagle built his nest in a higher place. But again, his eggs suffered a similar fate. In desperation, the eagle flew up to Jupiter, his lord and king, and placed the third brood of eggs as a sacred deposit in his lap, begging him to guard them from harm. But the beetle, having made a little ball of dirt, flew up with it and dropped it in Jupiter's lap. The god, rising quickly to shake it off, and forgetting the eggs, dropped them, and they were broken. Jupiter, knowing that the beetle was in the right, but loath to see the race of eagles diminished, used his good offices to persuade the beetle to call a truce with the eagle. This the beetle would not agree to do, and Jupiter was forced to transfer the eagle's breeding to another season when there were no beetles to be seen. The laws of hospitality are not to be broken with impunity. What an interesting story that was. The Wolf and the Crane. A wolf, engorging himself upon some poor animal he had killed, had got a small bone stuck in his throat. The pain was terrible, and he ran up and down, beseeching every animal he met to relieve him. None of the animals, however, felt very sorry for the wolf, for as one of them put it, "That bone which is stuck in the wolf's throat might just as well be one of mine." That's true. Finally, the suffering wolf met the crane. "I'll give you anything," he whined, "if you will help take this bone out of my throat." The crane, moved by his entreaties and promises of reward, ventured her long neck down the wolf's throat and drew out the bone. She then modestly asked for the promised reward. "Reward?" barked the wolf, showing his teeth. "Of all the ungrateful creatures I have permitted you to live, to tell your grandchildren that you put your head in a wolf's mouth without having it bitten off, and then you ask for a reward? Get out of here before I change my mind." Those who live on expectation are sure to be disappointed. The Country Mouse and the Town Mouse. Once upon a time, a country mouse who had a friend in town invited him for old acquaintance's sake to pay him a visit in the country. Though plain and rough and somewhat frugal in his nature, the country mouse opened his heart and store in honor of an old friend. There was not a carefully stored up morsel that he did not produce from his larder peas and barley, cheese, parings, and nuts to please the palate of his city-bred guest. The town mouse, however, turned up his long nose at the rough country fare. "How is it, my friend," he exclaimed, "that you can endure the boredom of living like a toad in a hole? You can't really prefer these solitary rocks and woods to the excitement of the city. You are wasting your time out here in the wilderness. A mouse, you know, does not live forever. One must make the most of life while it lasts. So come with me, and I'll show you life in the town." In the end, the country mouse allowed himself to be persuaded, and the two friends set out together on their journey to town. It was late in the evening when they crept stealthily into the city, and midnight before they reached the great house where the town mouse lived. On the table of the splendid banquet room were the remains of a lavish feast. It was now the turn of the city mouse to play host. He ran to and fro to supply all of the guests once. He pressed dish upon dish and dainty upon dainty upon him as though he were waiting on a king. The country mouse, for his part, pretended to feel quite at home and blessed the good fortune that had wrought such a change in his way of life. But in the midst of his enjoyment, just as he was beginning to feel contempt for his frugal life in the country, the sound of barking and growling could be heard outside the door. "What is that?" asked the country mouse. "Oh, it's only the master's dog," replied the town mouse. "Only?" replied the visitor in dismay. "I can't say that I like music with my dinner." At that moment the door flew open, and a party of revelers, together with two huge dogs, burst into the room. The affrighted friends jumped from the table and concealed themselves in a far corner of the chamber. At length, when things seemed quiet, the country mouse stole out from his hiding place, and bidding his friend goodbye, whispered in his ear, "This fine way of living may do for those who like it, but give me my barley bread in peace and in security, in preference to your dainty fare partaken with fear and trembling." A crust eaten in peace is better than a banquet partaken in anxiety. The Bible says things like that, kind of close to that. That's pretty cool. Well, there you go. That's it for Aesop's Fables tonight. See ya. Bye.